So we're going to talk about clone effects, because some of you have been asking about this. Now, there are two really, really good techniques that I'm not going to cover. First one is green screening. If you watch SciShow or Mikola, they use that. I don't have a green screen or a good way to light it, so that's not an option for me, and so I can't really talk about it. The second one is basically go through frame by frame using something like Motion or After Effects, and basically you click little dots around the entire clone, and for every single frame. And at 24 frames a second, that's an awful lot of frames to kind of go through. But if you watch Mika Kitty, she uses that technique to great success. But we're going to talk about three simple techniques, two of which will probably be applicable to you, and one of which only really is applicable if you have kind of a flat, very light background. Now, it's important to know that when you're trying to do these clone effects, unless you're doing green screen or masking, that you need to make sure to set your camera on manual focus and manual exposure, and you want to make sure the white balance is not auto. Basically, you don't want any settings in your camera to change between the two shots that you're taking. So you take the shot of one one clone, and then the shot of something else. You want to make sure that those shots are consistent. Otherwise, you're going to have big lines that show off that you're doing that. So I have a clip here that I've already picked out. I'm a clone. Oh. All right, and then I did a bunch of takes of that, and then I have... No, you're not. And then I did another one. No, you're not. Right, so it's important to go ahead and try multiple deliveries, just so then you know you have stuff to work with, because sometimes you'll sit there and you'll think, okay, it's going to take me this long to say something, so I'll pause, and then blah, and then it ends up taking a little longer than you expected, or a little shorter than you expected. You want to have some flexibility there. So I've picked out two clips that happen to work, and I've color corrected this first one so that the shirt is red and it looks terrible, but I'm going to go ahead and drag these clips on top of each other. It's not going to and one way to just quickly check and make sure that this is working is you can set the transparency of your clip down. So I'm going to set this to 50%, and then we can watch the whole thing. I'm a clone. No, you're not. Aw. All right, so there we go. That's going to work. Now I'm going to set this back to 100%. Now the first tactic, and this is probably one that you'll want to use for things like iMovie or very simple editors, is to use picture-in-picture. So basically, or crop, depending on what sort of editor you have. So you're going to crop basically just the first subject, and then if we play this back, I'm a clone. No, you're not. Aw. Right, so that works, but let me close this. You'll notice down here we have this issue where Red Clone's shadow is being cut off by the crop here. Now, it just so happens that the background has a nice line, so we can probably center it and hide it fairly well. Though not entirely. You see there's still a little bit of shadowing up here that looks not so great. So cropping is probably the simplest way to do things, but we're not going to go with that. Now this is something that may be specific to your editor, but if you have a mask filter, I'm going to drag the mask filter and apply it to this top clip here. And basically this lets you do kind of the same thing as crop, except you can manipulate the shape a little bit. If I wanted it to be a diagonal or pentagram, or well, it needs to have 4 sides for this particular mask. But now you'll see we still have the same problem, but I can do something called feathering, which is when basically I just soften the edge. It softens the edge of the mask. And now if I were to put this right around that line, it'd probably make it look a little bit better. Something like that, maybe, or even, yeah, so that's fairly well hidden. I'm a clone! No, you're not. Aw. Right. And see, now it's not very apparent that this line here is a problem. And now the final technique, and this really will only work if you have a light background, is you can adjust compositing modes, and this is going to depend on your editor, but if you look at blend modes for compositing, there are a whole bunch of different options. So I can do something like, let's see, let's go screen, see what that looks like. Okay, that looks like a disaster. Silhouette, that's not helpful at all, but there's a setting called darken. And basically what this does is it says, okay, for the top clip, if the color for a particular pixel in the top clip happens to be darker than the bottom clip, we'll use the top clip instead. Otherwise, we'll default to the bottom clip. I'm a clone! No, you're not. Aw. And see, this is absolutely perfect, because the shadow from Red Clone is still entirely there because there's nothing on the top clip that happens to be darker than it. And this is really just kind of a one-click wonder. This is something that I use for a lot of my stuff now. Now, the one drawback, though, is that because... Oh, come on, there we go. Now, yeah, here's the problem. If, for whatever reason, something in the second clip happens to be darker than the stuff in the top clip, it is not going to work. So you can't have your clones interact. If you want to have your clones interact or do anything like that, you're going to need to use more advanced forms of masking. But this should hopefully give you enough to get started. If you're on a light background, then maybe being able to do composite darkening is the way to go for you. Otherwise, if you can find some sort of line, maybe a door frame or this angle that I have here, and you can use a crop or a mask, that should be enough to get you started.